What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be having a very deep look at the Groza and its attachments in Warzone, and I'm going to be sharing my best attachment combination that you can use with this gun based on many hours of testing. For those of you guys that don't know, these in-game stated stats currently in Warzone for Cold War weapons are completely inaccurate and in many cases, literally backwards. So in most cases, you can't trust those descriptions at all while building your class setups. However, like I said, I've done a lot of testing and I'm going to go through a bunch of the key attachments in this video and show you guys exactly how they work and what they do to this gun. And then I'm going to be sharing what I consider to be the best way to run the Groza, at least for me and my playstyle. Some of this will of course come down to preference, and I would expect that some people will swap out certain attachments. But at the very least, this video is going to shed a lot of light on what the attachments actually do on this gun. And the first attachment we're going to be talking about today, this one is a no-brainer. This goes on pretty much every gun in Warzone, or at least it should be for you. This is the GRU suppressor, or the final suppressor that you unlock. This is just a must-have on basically every gun in Warzone, because it keeps you off the radar, it improves your velocity, and it improves your ranges. These are three of the most important stats you could possibly improve in Warzone, so this attachment slot is a no-brainer. The final suppressor should always be going on here. Now, moving on to the next attachment slot, this one is also extremely important. This is the barrel attachment. And with the barrels, the two key factors we want to be looking at are range and velocity. And as you can see here, while looking at my chart, when it comes to ranges, the ultralight barrel surprisingly gives you the biggest boost to your range, closely followed by the composite barrel. And then when we look at our velocity, the composite barrel is best here with a 70% boost to our bullet velocity, roughly 70%. There is a little bit of margin for error on this one. But that is a massive boost, and when you combine that with the range boost as well, the composite barrel becomes a no-brainer here. So for Warzone, this barrel is going on any one of my Groza setups. No matter how I set this gun up, I'm going to be using the composite barrel. Next up, I did want to have a look at the rear grip category, mainly just to show you guys that rear grips are pretty much pointless on the Groza. Most of them state that they improve your aim down sight time, but there's only one attachment here that actually improved our aim down sight time by a noticeable amount at 60 frames per second. And honestly, even if you're playing on PC with a higher frame rate, the difference to the aim down sight time that any of these attachments would make would be negligible, and therefore I don't recommend using any of them aside from potentially the Serpent Wrap. There is an argument for using the Serpent Wrap because it improves our hipfire spread by 30%, which is a massive improvement to our hipfire spread. So if you are going for a really heavy hipfire build, yeah, you should probably use the Serpent Wrap. But when it comes to any of the other grips, I don't see any reason to ever use any of them. So I would generally keep this slot empty. And speaking of hipfire, let's move into the laser category, because this is the category that tends to help your hipfire spread, depending on the attachment. And you can see here the regular steady aim laser, that reduces the diameter of your hipfire spread by 15%, which is not very much. However, the 5 milliwatt laser, this is 30%, just like the Serpent Wrap. I should also point out that if you try and stack the Serpent Wrap and the 5 milliwatt laser, they actually somehow completely invalidate each other. I was thinking, holy crap, we can get an insane hipfire build here. But when you put them together, you actually end up getting a worse hipfire spread than if you were using just one of these attachments. So don't try to combine your hipfire attachments with this. But yeah, the 5 milliwatt laser is amazing for hipfire. And then also the Ember sighting point is great for hipfire as well. However, this one does hurt your aim down sight and your sprint out time, and therefore you're better off with the 5 milliwatt laser or even that Serpent Wrap that I mentioned earlier in the rear grip category. But next up, let's have a look at the stock attachments, which tend to have an effect on your aim down sight time, your sprint out time, your aim down sight strafe speed, and your hipfire spread. And a few important things to point out here. First up, the Raider stock, the last one that you unlock, this gives you a huge improvement to your aim down sight strafe speed. You can strafe back and forth so fast while aiming down sight, which is great in close quarters fights, which the Groza excels in. And also, it significantly improves our sprint out time. Our sprint out time with the Raider stock is actually better than a lot of SMGs out there, and therefore that really solidifies the Groza's role as more of a close to mid-range assault rifle. So the Raider stock is an excellent choice. I would say closely followed by the CQB pad if you're looking for more of a hipfire build, because you get a great improvement to your hipfire with this, and it also helps your sprint out time quite a bit. It's not quite as fast as the Raider, but it's almost as fast as the Raider when it comes to sprint out time. The only thing with this is you don't get any improvement to your aim down sight strafe speed. Next up, let's get into a category that's often very important in Warzone, and this is the Underbarrel category, where we have all our foregrips. And the main thing we're looking for with these attachments are recoil. It turns out none of them were really affecting our aim down sight time or sprint out time or anything like that, which is nice. It seems like these mainly just impact your recoil. But let's have a look at the first three of these grips compared to the base recoil. And with this, the Infiltrator and Patrol, they don't really look like they're helping much. If anything, it looks like there's a bit more horizontal recoil, which is harder to control, so I wouldn't use the Infiltrator or Patrol. However, the standard foregrip, this definitely helps with our horizontal recoil, and it gives us much more of a straight vertical recoil pattern, which it's very easy to control vertical recoil, and therefore this is not a bad choice at all on the Groza. It's not going to make a massive difference by any means, but it will give a little bit of an improvement to your ability to control your recoil. Now let's move on to the other 3 grip attachments here. And with this, you can see with the Bruiser, we definitely don't have as much vertical recoil. So this grip actually helps with our vertical recoil. However, it doesn't help with that horizontal recoil at all. And therefore, honestly, I would rather go with that standard foregrip that helps with our horizontal recoil than the Bruiser, which only helps with our vertical recoil as far as I can see. But then we have the Spetsnaz Speed Grip. This one doesn't seem to help really at all. And then the Spetsnaz Grip, the final underbarrel attachment you have access to, this one also seems to help with our horizontal recoil control a little bit. And therefore, I would say this is a slight improvement to our recoil pattern here, but it's not necessarily an attachment I will tend to run. So honestly, after looking at all of these recoil plots, I don't feel like any of them massively improve the recoil on the Groza, and therefore I'm totally fine not using any of these. However, if I am going to be running one, I will go with the standard foregrip because it gives us a pretty much straight vertical recoil pattern instead of more of that S shape that we get with our base recoil. Now getting into the next slot, I wanted to touch on this briefly. This is the optic slot, and this is an area that's really going to come down to preference. Personally, I don't really like the iron sights on the Groza, so I like to use some form of an optic, but like I've been saying, this gun is mainly designed for those close to mid-range encounters, and therefore I don't like using a high zoom optic on this. Instead, I like pairing this gun with a sniper rifle or a bolt-action marksman rifle, and therefore I tend to go with a low zoom optic like a Millstop Reflex, for instance. I really like that on this gun, and therefore that is my preferred attachment, but this is an area where I would say just use what you're most comfortable with. And finally, this leaves us with the ammunition slot, and with this one, typically you do want to use some form of an extended mag, especially if you're not playing solos. If you're playing like duos, trios, or quads, you may have to deal with multiple enemies that have armor, and therefore you do want to get a larger magazine capacity. I just like going with the standard 60-round drum because it doesn't hurt our aim down sight time as much as the 60-round speed mag. And also, I don't really feel like I need an instant reload when I've got a 60-round magazine most of the time. So yeah, that's my preference there, and now let's get into my favorite attachment combination to use with the Groza. And that is this one right here. So with this, we have the GRU suppressor, of course, the composite barrel, the Millstop Reflex sight, the Raider stock so we can strafe really, really quickly in gunfights and also have an amazing sprint out time. And then finally, the standard 60-round drum mag. To me, this is the perfect Groza setup, assuming we're going to be pairing it with a sniper rifle or bolt-action marksman rifle for the longer range fights, which is how I prefer to run this. Now, having said this, if this doesn't suit you, I've got a couple other recommendations here. For the most part, I would keep this class setup the same. However, the one attachment that I consider to be sort of a floater, where I could get rid of that and swap it for something else, this is the stock attachment. The Raider stock is great, but it's not a necessity, and therefore you could swap this for one of the attachments that helps a lot with your hip fire, like the Serpent Wrap or the 5mm laser, or you could even go for a more accurate build and go with that standard foregrip instead of the Raider stock, while keeping all of the other attachments the same. And with that, that's going to cover it for my best attachment combination for the Groza in Warzone, along with a couple alternative setups for those that might want something slightly different. Now, I'm really interested in hearing in the comment section below what you guys think about this format for a video. This is a little different from what I normally do, but since the attachments for Cold War weapons are so screwed up in Warzone, I really do have to go through gun by gun because the attachments aren't even consistent across similar guns. So I'm obviously not going to be doing this sort of video for every single Cold War gun in Warzone. However, I am planning on doing this for all of the popular guns, or the guns that I feel are really worth using. And therefore, I'd also like to know in the comment section below, which of the other Cold War guns would you like me to do a similar style of video on, where I go through and test every single attachment to find the perfect Warzone build? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.